Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
Happy Thorsday to all who celebrate. Our guy Thor Nystrom from Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life joins us from his football cave where he now has every single FBS helmet. How many FCS helmets do you have? Is that the next?
I think we're up to 3. It is the next frontier, though. Yeah, for sure. Wow. I mean, where do you go from here? You got all the FBS, you got all the NFL. We got to go to FCS.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
High school? Do we do all the top level high school
CFL?
Teams in the country?
XFL?
The CFL? Yeah.
You know, I like the thing with all the Minnesota high school football helmets, so maybe I do an odyssey of that.
I think, I'll get you a Buffalo Bison helmet for sure. We can start there.
Benilled? Yeah, oh yeah.
Judd will get you a Benilled for sure.
Okay, I already got my Brainer Warrior one.
So, hey, before we dive in, talk about the 10-2 Vikings and celebrate Thorsday. Roku is America's #1 TV streaming platform, and we've enjoyed our partnership with them here on Purple Daily this season. So they offer the long-time built-in streaming menu. Obviously, I've actually been a Roku guy for like 10 years. I used to have it was like a HDMI or USB external thing that you would plug into your TV. Well, now they make smart TVs. So just go get a Roku smart TV, a Pro Series 4K TV that automatically adjusts picture quality for sporting events, movies, whatever you're watching with Smart Picture Max. The Mackies went and got themselves a 65-inch Roku Pro Series 4K TV right before football season to watch the Purple win 10 games before the second week in December. So go to Roku.com to learn more about these glorious Roku Smart TVs or shop at a retailer near you. So, Thor, it's Kirk Cousins week here. It's the Vikings are a game back of the Lions in the standings. I know the tiebreaker. The Lions and Packers play tonight. So major high leverage football for the Vikings in December when not that many people thought this would be the case. So just your general thoughts on where we are here with this team going into the home stretch of the season.
Got to feel good. Got to feel good about the decision that we talked about ad nauseum last spring in letting go Kirk Cousins and signing Sam. Really could have signed anybody, right? I mean, like the way that the Vikings were able to reconstitute that roster and take away what is an albatross of a cap hit that a guy like Kirk Cousins gets, it makes it impossible to contend. And that's what we were talking about. It wasn't necessarily any hate to Kirk Cousins, but also you wouldn't have projected Kirk Cousins to get better at this point in his career. He's closer to retirement age. So they made the correct decision. The Falcons very much regret theirs. If they could get out of that, if they could push a button and get out of that Kirk Cousins contract right now, it would be the fastest button push you've ever seen. They would rather start Michael Penix and get rid of, again, what is an albatross cap hit, but they can't do it. They signed that contract.
That's the thing. And so the thing is, if you think about this, guys, just through the Vikings prism, okay? And you think about what this has meant, not just from, the contract, which is a huge starting point because Phil and I harped on that for like the last 4 or 5 years. But let's go down the path of what this has proven. One is, if there was any tendency to think, well, O'Connell's done a really good job with Kirk, but it's still Kirk, like a really good statistical. It's a great marriage, but I mean, Kirk also gets a bunch of the credit here. Kevin O'Connell and his staff have now rehabilitated a career that was dead basically upon arrival with the Jets in Darnold. To your point, you not only were able to free up cap room, but then you spent it wisely on defense. Imagine this defense. Danielle Hunter leaves, Kirk comes back. You might have gotten Van Ginkel. You probably don't get Grenard. Like, you just think about all of the tentacles, all of the fallout that this has meant, Thorsky, to the Vikings beyond just the Kirk thing. I mean, I think it's been just fantastic news across the board for everyone at the Vikings. And this really, to me, has proven so many things about which we would have stayed curious. Can O'Connell do this with McCarthy? Well, no, there's no doubt in my mind.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And again, said it many times, I'll say it again. The offense is going to be better next year and it will have better quarterback play. What we're seeing right now is just the tip of the iceberg. Kevin O'Connell has that superpower of whether rehabilitating the quarterback, whether just having a QB friendly system, however you want to say that. But we have seen that now going back, which was another data point in the argument for letting Kirk Cousins go, using the premium draft pick on the quarterback prospect that Kevin O'Connell finally, after years, was like, that dude, that's the guy that I want. And now, you're in the situation that you're in. But yeah, there's more than one way to play this game. We talk about the NFL. It's a poker table with 32 players around there. You're merely just trying to extract the most excess roster value from your players every single season, as opposed to what you're paying them. And that's where the issue became. You got into the quagmire with the Kirk Cousins discussion, because he could never justify what the cap hits were. Now you flip this thing. You've gone cheaper at the quarterback position. Are you getting worse quarterback play, Kirk Crusaders, this year than you did last year? I mean, come on. And now the books are open going forward. So the roster is just going to get augmented. It just sets up really well for the future. And again, look at the other side. You need to look no further than across to the other sideline this weekend for an example of how not to do this. I'm happy that the Vikings are off that carousel now, and the future looks bright.
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing. Both the Falcons and the Vikings were 7-win teams last year with quarterback uncertainty because they didn't have anyone under contract that was a viable starter. They both went in saying, okay, we're going to draft a first-round quarterback if a guy that we like is there. And we got some pretty good pieces around on the roster, like kind of similar cases. And one team said, yeah, and we need a bridge quarterback. Let's get one for 1 year and $10 million. And the other team said, we could use a bridge quarterback. Let's go 4 years, $100 bajillion, and regret it 7 months later. And I always say all this. I mean, watch Kirk come in here and just stick it to the Vikings for $350. But here's a segue for you guys. This is a great email from a few weeks ago from, I believe it's listener Adam Nabel, I think it's pronounced. We were going to use this on a Feedback Friday, but we just ran out of time during one of the shows. So let's bring it up here. He says, hey guys, love the show. I've been a daily listener since attending the draft party last year. Would love to hear your opinions on this. So with so much evidence to suggest that the success of a rookie quarterback is greatly dependent on the program they are drafted to, from Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, all in better situations now, to the multiple quarterbacks that the Jets, Browns, Bears, Panthers ruin every single year, what is your power ranking list of all 32 teams' quarterback development programs and coaching? He says a tier list would also suffice here. I don't know if we have time to do 32 teams in tiers, but if we had tier number 1 is extreme quarterback makeover. These are the teams that you want to send your client to if you're an agent. And then at the bottom of the list, it's here is the quarterback graveyard where your career is over before it even starts in training camp. We'll start with you, Thor. Who would you put in the extreme quarterback makeover? Which franchises are in the extreme quarterback makeover category?
At the best ones?
Vikings, yeah, Vikings for sure, right? At this point?
Yeah, Vikings would be up there. The Chiefs and Andy Reid, you would have to have way up there. I almost don't even want to say this. You'd have to put Sean Payton a decent ways up there as well.
It's true. I mean, it's
true.
A lot of mocking,
I hate it.
Rightfully so. Vikings fans hate him, but and there's been some people wondering what your thoughts are on Bo Nix because you were critical of Bo Nix. But yeah, he's turned Bo Nix into a really good starting quarterback as a rookie.
He's turned Bo Nix into a passable starting NFL quarterback, I think. As a rookie, the discerning minds out there might wonder if there's any more ceiling left to untap there for Bo Nix. But you do have to credit Sean. It's both the thing of the identification of the talent, then the development of that talent, and then the last step of it having that system in place on the field, right? Both of the personnel and then not stretching a dude outside of his means, right? And just having him do the stuff that he's good at. That's what Sean Payton's good at, right? He's just going to leverage the things that his quarterbacks are skilled at and attempt as best he can to eschew anything where he's going to get into trouble. And yeah, he's been able to coax a little bit of value out of Bo Nix here, whether or not people think that's smoke and mirrors or not.
Sean Payton, he's good, but I will say this, and this to me is the difference between the Sean Payton camp and Sean Payton. Don't forget, he was the offensive boy wonder of like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And now you've got like the McVay, Shanahan, O'Connell, LaFleur tree.
Yeah.
Payton has a very succinct idea of what he wants the profile of the quarterback he's going to work with to be. Yeah. I feel like the Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell, LaFleur tree far more accepting of, okay, here's what you do well. Here's what I see. I'm going to help you get there. I like Russ Wilson. It's no accident that he was a bust for the Broncos, and now he's come back. And this is another interesting part of this tiers. There actually is a tier of non-offensive guys who bring quarterbacks into a culture and they develop. Tomlin has done this before. Yeah. John Harbaugh, who was a special teams coach. Like the pivot from Flacco to Lamar Jackson, a lot of coaches would not have made. Like they'd be like, that has nothing to do with what we do. McDermott in Buffalo deserves for that system, again, some credit. But I really think if you're to put together these tiers, I would say, because the quarterback position is just so vitally important, I would say it's more like a list of who would you allow to babysit your kids.
If you're like an agent or
no, like if you're a parent though, like the question is, would you drop
if you're Bob Nix?
Would you drop your dog off or your kid off with this person?
Yeah.
And I think the thing is the Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell. I think what you have there is a fundamental understanding of what they have to do both physically and mentally to get the most from their QBs. Like Jordan Love, I don't know. He might be great eventually. He might not be. He might be. But Jordan Love took a significant step, in fact, because I think that LaFleur looks at skill sets and develops those. The Peyton thing, I think, is a very strategic. Bo Nix looks like Drew Brees, so I'm going to get that. Nothing wrong with that, but I would almost skew more towards this new incorporation of the art of almost quarterback zen, which is what I think O'Connell and that group has.
Yeah, and I think that top group, if we were doing this like tiers, that the thing that whether you want to say coach, whether you want to say organization, decision maker, that they have in common, it's being good at all three of those tier things of the identifying the correct player, the development of that player, and then putting them in the best position to succeed. And some organizations or some evaluators, they 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but they don't have all three. It is important to have all three. Something that, analogous in college football, you see this all the time, and it's a decent example because the roster turnover is greater. And then you have the coaches moving around and stuff like that. You have guys that just run their system, and it's like, this is my system. Right. And they don't modify it whatsoever for who comes in. Why did Cliff Kingsbury get fired at his alma mater? And then a month later, he got an NFL job because he looks like Ryan Gosling. Why did his alma mater fire him? It's because the last 2 seasons, their offense devolved, and he never cared about defense anyway. And the reason why is because the quarterbacks that he chose, they were not great fits for his air raid system. And he didn't modify the offense at all because it's like, oh, this is my offense, right? Like the play call, a guy who just got hired, one of the youngest offensive coordinators in the nation, Ben Arbuckle, Oklahoma just hired him to try to turn around their offense, hired him from Wazoo. Ben Arbuckle, they asked him at the beginning, like, what's your system, Ben? He's in Norman. It's like the opening press or whatever. He goes, some people think that I run air raid. Some people think that I throw a lot. He goes, look over the games, look over the box scores. He's like, depending on the year, depending on the personnel I have, if it makes more sense to keep the ball on the ground based on that personnel, we do that. It makes more sense to use the quarterback's legs. It makes more sense to throw it 90% of the time. We're perfectly happy doing that as well. The best coaches, the best play callers, they are tailoring the system year after year to the personnel on hand. Again, to put those guys in the best positions to succeed, give the team the best chance to win.
Mm-hmm. So you've watched now for 3 months. Drake May is showing something with nothing around him in New England. We've had the Bo Nix conversation. He's going to be a playoff quarterback with Sean Payton's tutelage and system. Jaden Daniels, I think Caleb Williams, there's been some meltdown stuff there, but if you get the coaching right, I mean, this draft class to this point, we're 3 months in, and J.J. McCarthy hasn't even taken a snap yet, and Michael Penix barely either. But it looks like it's about to live up to the hype. Going in 2 years before this draft class, people were talking about it. There might be 4 or 5. Usually, when you look at the best quarterback draft classes, it's like 3 guys in retrospect, maximum in a first round. Are we real? I know how you feel about J.J. McCarthy, but are we really looking at like 5 or 6 dudes who are average to high-end starting quarterbacks out of last year's draft class?
Yeah, I think potentially, yes. And we'll have to see on Penix, but, Penix, I certainly like his talent level more than Bo Nix, just in terms of the physical tools. And you guys know that I think J.J. McCarthy will turn out to be at or near the top of that quarterback class when all is said and done, the career output. It was a really good quarterback class. We talked about it all spring. Some people are like, why do you keep talking about the quarterbacks? Well, because the Vikings need one and because this quarterback class is nasty. And the Vikings were able to get in on that at the perfect time. And we'll wait for the Ferrari to come out of the garage next September.
Yeah. Vroom, vroom, MFers.
If I may, I'd like to shift the subject.
Yeah.
Because tonight, the Packers are going to play the Lions in Detroit. And I see a very interesting possibility here, okay? And it's this. So I feel like we're very prepared to complain about, and I have no problem with this, the seeding in the conferences and the fact that a team that could win like 14 games could be the number 5 seed. But may I paint a picture with the Lions injury situation on defense, Thor?
Yeah.
Where at the end of the day, the red hot Eagles claim the top seed. The Lions regress a little bit here just because they have so many, including some star players, hurt who aren't coming back, and that the Vikings win the division. I do not think that if you look at the schedules of these teams, if you look at what Detroit is going to face, and if you look at the fact that teams ordinarily lose more than 1 game in a season, I do not think it's crazy to think that the Eagles could get the bye, the Vikings could win the North, and Detroit ends up as the 5 seed. The only fault for Detroit being this is a sport where it's just unbelievably injury-prone players, blah, 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 and Detroit does not hang on to win the division. What do you think about that?
I mean, certainly could happen, and it's an interesting thought experiment. Detroit's schedule down the stretch it's grisly. You have the game on short rest tonight against a quality opponent in Green Bay. I'm curious to hear who you guys are rooting for in that game. But then after that, you host the Bills. Then you're at the Bears, and this will be, at least if nothing else, the best that the Bears offenses look now that they have that idiot Waldron out of there. Then you have to travel to San Francisco, and then you host the good guys. The good guys are coming to town, and the Vikings for the last game. It would be pretty fascinating if we're within the game or tied heading into that one. But yeah, you can certainly see a scenario where in the 4 games in advance of that, Detroit picks up a loss or 2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of rooting interest here, I know that there's a lot of people that probably consume this show, Vikings fans, that would just never root for the Packers under any circumstance.
Good way to live.
Unless your goal is to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. And now Philadelphia is kind of over here as this, they haven't lost a game in 2 months. But you can control a lot more of what happens here in your own division because you play these teams twice. So right now the Vikings are technically 2 games behind the Lions because right now they don't own the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Now, if they stayed 1 game apart, both teams were to win out or whatever, and then they play each other and the Vikings win, then you'd be looking at division tiebreaker or common opponent? You'd be down the list of tiebreakers if they split the head-to-head. I feel like because you're a game up on the Packers and you have a head-to-head notch, you're technically 2 games up on the Packers. The Packers beating the Lions tonight would be more advantageous for the Vikings' chances to get the number 1 seed, a bye in the first round, and home field advantage, right? I mean, shouldn't we be rooting for the Packers tonight?
I think so.
I hate to say it, but this is one. It's like you're looking around. What other options do we have? We need to rally around. A team that we don't like very much tonight. Obviously, advantageous for the Vikings if the Packers beat the Lions. I might just not watch the thing, and then afterwards,
it's the best Thursday night game on paper in a long time.
you have to root. You have to root for Green Bay in it, and like I just.
Well, you really can't lose too much though, because like if the Packers lose, it does help you.
Yeah, I will say though the Lions.
But I'm with Phil. Yeah.
The Lions, both teams are going to have 10 days off between sort of a pseudo bye, but the Lions then play Buffalo in Week 15. The Lions, Packers, and then Lions, Buffalo are shaping up to be two of the better games on paper. And then they go play the Lions at Chicago, which if they are a little bit more refreshed now with incompetent guys getting fired, they play at San Francisco, which is, they're kind of ravaged at this point. And then the Vikings. But you could make a case. Those are 5 tough games for the Lions that they're going to drop one in there somewhere, maybe 2. The Packers, if we're comparing schedules, after they play the Lions, go at Seattle, home against the Saints. That's a win. At the Vikings, and then home against the Bears. So the Lions do have the harder schedule playing out. So I guess on the flip side, maybe you want the Lions to just shove the Packers further down, and then you hope that they trip up against Buffalo, and then you take care of business when you play them head-to-head. That's another way to look at it.
Yeah, the importance of getting the 1 seed, it can't be understated to any, potential of the Vikings doing anything this postseason. Like, to me, it's that thing or bust. Like, I just don't see this Vikings roster going on the road, starting in round 1 and winning week after week, and then qualifying for the Super Bowl. Whereas if the Vikings were to get that 1 seed, now you have your automatic entrance into round 2. That's already taken care of. And now you're welcoming teams to your home up until the Super Bowl. Like, that's the one scenario that could happen where the Vikings would have that shot, I think, to get to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I mean, that's what, puts it a pressing importance the Lions need to lose.
The problem.
Okay, so I just did the playoff machine. I just played around with the playoff machine for the next 2 weeks, for this weekend and next weekend. Mm-hmm. So if the Packers beat the Lions tonight, if the Vikings beat the Falcons, and the Eagles will likely still beat the Panthers this Sunday. That's going to happen. We go to next week. If the Vikings beat the Bears, the Steelers upset the Eagles in Philadelphia, which is possible. I wouldn't say that that's a gimme for Philadelphia. And the Bills do beat the Lions. The Vikings are the 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, there's still time left.
Yep. So if the Vikings win their next 2, Packers win tonight, and the Eagles split one of these next 2, the Vikings would be the 1 seed.
I'm a little bit concerned, though, to the Bears, about the Bears getting that spark now against the Vikings as well.
We were concerned about that a month ago, and then they were still incompetent.
Well, and then they were going to fire. Well, I thought
now you're
did
down
not want
2 coaches. Everyone's double dutying behind the scenes. I don't know, man.
But they're all refreshed. So, and look, if we think that the Bears could get a spark to potentially upset Detroit, then certainly the same has to hold true with the Vikings. Now, back to the Eagles schedule. So if we're talking about the top seed, they go Carolina, Pittsburgh the next 2 weeks, as Declan said, at home, at Washington, but then 2 more. Then they close at home again. So 4 of their last 5 are at home against the Cowboys and the Giants.
Those should be.
So Philadelphia's got a pretty favorable schedule to probably lose tops 1 more game.
Right now, who would have the? If it was a tiebreaker between the Eagles and the Vikings, it would be record against common opponent, right? Because they don't play each other, obviously.
Right.
So if they both finish with the same record, I think it would be record against common opponent, and then maybe conference record, or maybe that's flip flop.
I think it's flip flopped. I think conference records first with that. Yeah.
Okay. And the Vikings are sitting here just to parse this fully out. The Vikings, in terms of conference record, are 5-2. Lions are 7-1. Packers are 4-3. Eagles are 6-2. So Vikings and Eagles both have 2 conference losses. This is, this is awesome.
It's great.
Who would have thought we'd be doing this?
I know.
Certainly, back 9 months ago. How could you sign Sam Darnold? Fire everybody.
Right.
How could you do this? And here they are, just sitting here, pounding on the door for the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a path. There's a path too, where at these tiebreakers. So it's head to head. Then it's conference record. Then it's the wins-loss percentage in the common games, minimum of 4. Then strength of victory. Then strength of schedule.
Yeah.
So like with the Eagles playing, softies near the end, Vikings playing some better teams, That could come down to it.
Need the Bears to rack up a couple wins to beef up that strength of schedule, Mark, huh? Yeah. So this is it's football. It's fun, man. It's fun. Hey, earlier in the show, Jonathan Greenard's name was mentioned as, when you open up some salary cap space, you can go get a bunch of good defensive players. Can we just take a moment to have just a moment of appreciation for Jonathan Greenard? So he was brought in to not like straight up apples to apples replace Danielle Hunter, we thought, right? Like, oh, well, Danielle's clearly the best player. But yeah, if you can get Grenard and then Van Ginkel, Jonathan Greenard going into week 14 leads all defensive players in total pressures. So it's Jonathan Greenard, number 1, Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals, number 2, Jared Verse, by the way, from the Rams, rookie from the Rams, is 3rd on this list. Myles Garrett, then Danielle Hunter, who's having a really good season, is 5th, but he leads. It's funny, Aiden Hutchinson played 5 games. He's still 12th in the league in total pressures.
That's a huge.
Playing only 5 games.
Yep.
So Grenard is number 1 in pressures. He is, let's see here, tied for 4th in sacks with 10 sacks, just a sack and a half behind number 1. Tackles for loss, Grenard, among all defensive players, is tied for 6th. Van Ginkel is actually tied for 3rd on that list. And then PFF tracks something called stop tackles, which is if you make a tackle and it stops the opposing team from a successful play. 60% of the yards on first down or whatever it is, 50%. Jonathan Greenard is 3rd among all edge rushers in stop tackle. I mean, he is a top 3 edge rusher across the board in all these categories. And you didn't think you were signing that type of a dude, I think, if you go back to March, replacing Danielle Hunter, Thor.
No, you certainly didn't, and I think you have to be very optimistic about Kwesi's work in free agency, particularly the last cycle. But there's been some criticism for Kwesi, some residual from the first draft, the second draft. But yeah, the what he did, sort of moneyballing the free agent process without many resources this past offseason, what he's done in the UDFA ranks. I think that you do see a progression with him, and I'm going to be fascinated this offseason when Kwesi and the Vikings have the 6th most projected cap space, and you have a lot of the key positions already locked down, what he's going to do with that cap space, because we've mostly seen him shopping on the bargain rack, and he's done a really good job with that. Now that you can go to Saks Fifth Avenue, I want to see what he buys.
By the way, this just came in. You can't really see it, but I'll hold it up here as we're podcasting.
Yep.
Jonathan Greenard named NFC Defensive Player of the Month for November.
There we go.
That's awesome. Good for him. So I think the interesting thing about this, though, your point here is, and again, it's very different than how the Vikings have previously operated with Spielman. But I think what we're looking at here, Thor, is a case of Kwesi definitely has his philosophies, like what positions to spend on. Like there's definitely a structure in his mind. But I think the deeper discussion, like when we're talking about, okay, why are the drafts not great? But clearly the pro personnel moves are great. I think it's departments. I don't think it's Kwesi necessarily. I think he listens, but you know what? How much of an advantage is it that Brian Flores sees guys play in this league, can put on film, and can say, you know what? Grenard's good, but I can make him great. Van Ginkel, same thing. Blake Cashman. I mean, Flores said that a buddy, that he was not familiar with Blake Cashman's work until a buddy here, because he played for the Gophers, told him, hey, look at Blake Cashman. So he did. And he's like, okay, this fits perfectly. So, I think we're getting too hung up on, what does Kwesi do as far as, not philosophy, but as far as, he's not a scout. So he's literally, for the most part, listening to what people tell him on players, which is why I think there's such a wide variance here between the drafts and pro personnel, because those departments aren't the same. Those people aren't the same. So, I think there's a very interesting story to be told here about the operation, because we can't think of Kwesi like a traditional football GM. He has a thought process, but it's also very influenced by those around him.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you have the two different, those guys beautifully exemplify two different paradigms of general managers that we see in the NFL. Right. Spielman being the conviction guy. I trust my eye. I trust my feel. When I was in front of that kid, I believed it. Whatever.
So true.
Yeah.
Vontae Mack, no matter what.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And trying to figure out who went to the birthday party of Bo, whatever his name was in that movie. Whereas
Bo Callahan, put some
respect for Bo Callahan. Wisconsin does nothing but churn out great QBs. We all know that.
It was the last good quarterback Wisconsin's had, Bo Callahan. But whereas Kwesi, it's the guy who came from the stock market and looking over those markets, and it becomes identifying the data streams that you trust, and then just monitoring those as far as like what where your investments are going to go. With the it's like the coaching staff, the scouts, you have all these different information spigots, and it's sort of like weighing what that would be best for the roster against their opinions of different things, and that sort of formulates his decision making matrix. It's it's a fascinating difference between the two, and I think like another man, and I'm not saying one is right or wrong. It's just totally disparate type strategies. It's interesting to see the way that they manifested within the building with the Vikings. Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer despised each other by the end, and it didn't even take until the end. Yeah. And they're still talking trash about each other behind closed doors, and sometimes even with the microphone turned on. Whereas, you want to know who has a good relationship? Have you watched those draft inside the war rooms where Kwesi's sitting next to Kevin O'Connell? It's like stepbrothers, those two. Right? Like, I mean, they love each other. Flores, the whole deal. Kwesi has a good relationship with everybody. And why wouldn't he? He is trusting them literally with the decisions that he is making that will inform the rest of his professional career. In some ways, he is trusting all those men, a little fraction, each one of them, with his livelihood, with his life. Right? I mean, because it's their opinions and their reads on things that then he's parsing out. But yeah, to your point, it's the opposite of Spielman, where he's like, I don't need your opinions. I sat across from that kid in Mobile, Alabama, and he made me believe he's our next quarterback. Totally different thing with Kwesi.
Yeah. Kwesi and KOC and Flores, the entire Brain Trust, have done such a great job this year, just grinding, building a 10-2 team. I would like to personally get them a holiday present. Maybe a massage. Maybe they could all just use a little exhale here. Woodhouse Spas is one of our new partners here on Purple Daily. Locally owned, Maple Grove, Woodbury, Rosedale Center. As we've talked about this week, I'm like a 2 to 3 times a year massage guy. It's great. Relieve some tension, relaxation. Maybe you are or aren't, but someone in your life surely would love to go and maybe pick one of the 70 spa services at Woodhouse Spas. Think about your spouse, your mom, somebody in your family for holiday season. You can celebrate anniversaries, birthdays, weddings, gift cards available either in spa or online at woodhousespas.com. Maple Grove, Woodbury, Rosedale Center. And again, woodhousespas.com. What's going on at the Fillmore here downtown, Dex?
Yeah, so the Fillmore is taking a little break of shows in December, but they're going to be back in January with a ton of great shows. You have Carrie King will be there. The Taylor Swift dance party on February 1st. Can't wait for that one. I know Judd's going to be a big guy for a T-Swift dance party.
Yeah.
Foster the People, they're going to be there mid-February.
Foster the People. I like
Foster the People will be there. Phineas from Billie Eilish's brother, he will be there. Plenty of great shows coming up at the Fillmore. ScoreNorth.com/tickets to find out more.
All right, Thor. I think it's time here to dive into
I want a mock.
the latest mocks. So we've got this one from yesterday, The Athletic / the New York Times. I'm just going to fly through here. You tell us your thoughts.
Okay.
So Jacksonville drafting Travis Hunter, number 1 overall.
Yeah.
Makes some sense. The Vegas Raiders drafting Cam Ward, quarterback Miami, number 2.
Oh, over Shadir?
And Shadur going to the Giants, number 3.
Okay.
I wonder if that would mean...
I mean, like, I have Shadir over Cam Ward. Will be interesting to see the way that the NFL parses that. And it will also be interesting to see one thing that we have to keep in mind with this. Traditionally, you have the top 2 quarterbacks. If they're close, it's like, how will the final evaluations fall with some of those teams in the top 3? This year with these two guys, you have to monitor the domino of Coach Prime himself in 2 different ways. Could he take over one of the head coaching jobs of one of these organizations that is picking in the top 3, 4, 5? Obviously, their odds to take Shedeur at that point would skyrocket. That being a big one. And then the other thing that Deion had said a couple months ago about how he was absolutely going to get involved with both those players' draft process and potentially do the Manning family thing, that they did with Eli Manning and forced his trade from the Chargers to the Giants. That's something you have to monitor with those top quarterbacks, because that could influence the order that they go in.
I also think there's a fighting chance with what we're seeing from certain teams that take QBs and then fail miserably developing them. I think we might be on the precipice of that happening more and more, which is my guy's not going to play for you. And keep in mind, guys, this goes back to Elway in Baltimore in the 80s.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's going to be a propensity to rip Deion Sanders or whoever the agents or the powers that be for, who do you think you are trying to control this process? I don't know how we can sit here and clown the Jets and the Panthers and these garbage organizations, the Jaguars, on one side of the fence, and then come back and say, like, well, how could you try to roadblock this from happening? It's like, no, I mean, you've seen it enough here with some of these franchises. I don't want my quarterback going to 3 or 4 of these teams just to be irrelevant and have their career be up in smoke.
If this was a court case, one thing that would be entered into the evidence of why the QBs are right is what Kevin O'Connell said, which is teams let young quarterbacks down far more than young QBs let teams down. That will be entered into. And look, we also, to Phil's point, we cannot clown, and we did, and probably rightfully so, Sam Darnold, right?
Yeah.
And now you watch him and you're like, oh, sorry. Hold on a second.
This is what it was supposed to look like 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly right. So I used to be in the camp of that's a bunch of BS. You're hijacking the player away from the team. But I'm now coming full circle, or at least doing a hard turn to, I don't blame if Deion or anybody else says, we're not playing for the Jets. We're just not going to.
No.
I don't blame them.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah. And power to the players, by the way. The idea of criticizing a guy because he is creating leverage in a situation where typically they don't have any. If you have the opportunity to have that leverage, why would you not? We started this episode with a discussion about franchises that reliably kill quarterbacks and the other ones that reliably develop them. If you're a quarterback, you want to go to the dead end situation right out the jump. Like the idea that they would dictate the location, I think it makes total sense. And not only that, Deion's just being honest here. Like behind closed doors, you have agents doing this stuff. I mean, even deeper down into the draft, trying to push guys towards certain teams or don't draft this guy or draft my guy. You see that stuff. It's just that typically there's not sort of a powerful figure that steps out and is like, yeah, I'm doing that. So we're going to get my son to one of those franchises that or to a coach that is a good quarterback developer and has a good scheme with that. So I definitely love that, and I definitely believe that Deion's going to do that. And by the way, one last point that I have to get off my chest: I don't understand why Deion Sanders gets criticized so much. The job that he did, first of all, he did unprecedented things at Jackson State. Today is National Signing Day, so let's go back to 3 years ago when he did something that had never been done before. He flipped the #1 overall recruit, a guy named Travis Hunter. Have you guys heard of him? Flipped him on National Signing Day from going to Florida State, Deion's alma mater, to Jackson State, an FCS school. They played, a year there. Shedeur, of course, was there. Go to Colorado the last 2 years. They took over by far the worst Power 4 program. Colorado was 1-11 the year before, just an absolutely hapless program, and was near the bottom of the FBS. Like there was a whole bunch of G5 teams that were better than them. And in 2 years, turned them into a Big 12 contender and a quasi CFP contender. Now they fell just a bit short, but the turnaround that they did in those 2 years at Colorado was absolutely ridiculous. And it goes beyond just having Shedeur and Travis Hunter. Deion Sanders overturned that entire roster. He had this fascinating thing at a press conference about a month ago, and people were asking him about that. Like, Deion, when you took over, everybody was criticizing you because you were the first guy to do the whole hog, get rid of half the roster, bring in half the roster with the portal. Like, do you feel vindicated? Yada, yada. And he's like, I still don't get the criticism of that. He said, like, you signed 20 guys out of high school. Maybe 4 or 5 of them play as a freshman. The other 15 or 16 are going to enter the transfer portal. You're going to lose them anyway. Why would you not go to the portal more often? Deion Sanders doesn't get the credit for the Moneyball era that he brought to NIL and the transfer portal. And if he goes to the NFL this offseason, I know there's going to be a lot of people that criticize it. He has earned that potential call to the NFL because he's done something the last 2 years at Colorado I don't know if another human being could have done. Yeah,
it feels like he's leaving. It just and he's been saying all the right things, but I think it'd be tough to stay because there's really nothing that's anchoring him there, and there's going to be other jobs that are maybe even tugging at his heartstrings from the past, like Florida State or the Cowboys if that opens up. Scrolling down here on The Athletic to the 28th overall pick, where the Minnesota Vikings address offensive line here, and they select offensive tackle / guard from Purdue, and you can help me with the pronunciation here, Marcus Mbow. MBOW.
Yeah, so a play there, would be the offensive guard. Now, the prospect, you can, however you want to look at that. To me, this would be more of a decision of you have the resource of that 6th most cap space. This is your one premium pick. What are we going to do in advance in free agency to set us up for the best, opportunity for success with this pick to extract more value out of that rookie over your 4 or 5 year contract? Mm-hmm. What I would do is I would want to, the way that I see this is you got to sign 2 immediate starters on the interior defensive line and 2 at cornerback. And then of course you have the right guard thing. So that's sort of our baseline. I would want to use that draft at 1st round pick on either the corner or the interior defensive line. I want to, the right guard position is something that I would want to do in the draft. That's just me. But every year we get the guys at the end of the 1st round where they're the awesome collegiate tackle. It is a clear projection inside. They're going to be good. Our enemies, the Packers, did that with Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. So it's certainly something that you could do. The way that I would do it, again, it's the cap space for that right guard position. And this pick, it goes into the either an interior defensive line or a cornerback, 2 positions that are stacked in this class.
Okay, question off of that. So let's go back to our previous discussion about how Kwesi approaches things, which is, again, not through a scouting prism, but through a Moneyball prism of positional talent and also input from both his scouting staff and then pro personnel. If you reverse engineer it that way, GM Thorsday, what do you think he does? Because I think we need to rethink how we believe their thought process goes. Because, like, for me personally, I often default to football guy. We need a center. Garrett Bradbury's there. Which turns out to be a mistake. I don't know. I also don't know that the Vikings value, and they do need to improve here. We've been talking about this for years. I don't know with the way that they currently value interior offensive line. Yeah. If they do go the free agency route or they try to go with a cheaper free agent or the draft. But what would this all say to you as far as how they would actually value draft picks, positions in the 1st round at the end of the day in 2025?
I mean, if this was the pick here, the Mbao kid, I don't know how to pronounce it either, Phil. But if that was, I would be surprised as well because of what you're saying, Judd. I don't get the read that they want to pump a bunch of money or draft equity into that position. I could be wrong, but Mbao, it's not like it's an unimpeachable evaluation for him either. Interior defensive line and cornerback, they are deeper positions and they are more top-heavy positions in this draft than, for instance, offensive guard or interior offensive line as a whole. And those are positions that cost more money if you're doing it apples to apples on the free agent market. So you could get a more quality player at a position where you have to pay more if you go to the free market. And Kwesi's lean already in terms of that stuff. I think this pick is going to go towards defense, but I mean, they could always surprise me, but I expect Kwesi to sign the veteran offensive guard to start that right guard position next year, this offseason.
Yeah. Hey, last couple minutes here. It's a big weekend of college football.
Yeah.
We got all the conference championships and drama and college football playoffs. So give us Thor's college football junkie thing to watch for Vikings fans this weekend.
We got 2 days of madness. We got 3 on Friday night, and then we got 6 on Saturday. Now we got the 9 conferences. RIP to the Pac-12. Right. Let's do one for each.
Yeah, are those 2 teams like going to play each other for fun, or how does that work? We don't do there's 2 teams left in the Pac-12, right? Is it Washington State and Oregon State?
It's the 2-pack.
Yeah, they should play each other. They should play each other.
They did. Next year they're playing each other twice. But yeah, I mean, like, it's going to be a couple years until they get enough teams there to try to pretend that they're still the Pac-12. We should get an automatic bid into the college football playoff. That's an argument that they're going to have to make in the future. In this one, Boise State, a team who is going to the Pac-12, they're joining the 2-pack in a couple years, try to bolster that thing up after the mass exodus. They are hosting UNLV on Friday night in the MWC Championship. If you're a Vikings fan and you have not caught Ashton Jeanty live, open up your Friday night. The kid's an absolute treat to watch. I do think the Vikings will end up picking too low to take Ashton Jeanty, but it is the running back position, and we have seen different stuff with this. I mean, like, it's sort of like the flavor of the month, or what way is the wind blowing that draft process. Bijan's draft process, obviously, and Bijan's a great prospect, and I think Jeanty analogous to this, but you had a dopey decision maker and a franchise that isn't a Moneyball franchise in Atlanta that took him with a premium pick there in the top 10. Are we going to get something like that? Well, in my opinion, it'll be something closer to the middle of the first round where Jeanty will go. Obviously, the Vikings are going to be at the end of it. But there is a potential. I mean, there is a chance just because of the position. And if the Vikings did get access to Jeanty, like we talked about in the past, I would turn that card in real quick at the end of the first round. He's going to do some damage here against UNLV. And 2 days after this game, he's going to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony as well. So something to monitor there. And I think UNLV, they played Boise close the first game. You might see that again. I mean, I'm not going to put it past UNLV to potentially pull the upset. And then as far as Saturday, I was going to toss out Texas-Georgia SEC title game, but we've already seen that game one time, and everyone knows that. Instead, so rarely do I do kind things for my friend, former co-host, Jesse Pierce. I would like to end the show today by doing so. Jesse, this one's for you. Big 12 championship, Saturday, Arlington, Texas. Arizona State, everybody's darling. Heading into this game, they had the upstart this year with their new head coach, Kenny Dillingham, taking on Iowa State, a team that people are starting to sleep on a bit here. I think Iowa State pulls this upset against Arizona State. Arizona State has a one-dimensional offense, and the only receiver that they throw the ball to, Jordan Tyson, interestingly, a former Colorado Buffalo who transferred out right when Deion got there. He has as many targets as the next 3 guys combined on the Arizona State roster. He is done for the season. He suffered a season-ending injury in the last game. Because of that, Arizona State, they will have no passing game whatsoever. Their entire offense, literally the whole thing, rushing and the receiving, is going to be funneled to their running back, Cam Scatabo. Scatabo is a fun guy who has put up a metric ton of individual statistics this year. He's going to be like a late day 3 guy. So I expect the Vikings probably will have chosen a running back before that. But Scatabo can catch the ball. He breaks tackles at one of the highest rates in the FBS. But in this game, he's going to have to assume 35, 36 touches because he's the only offensive playmaker they have. Iowa State, like I said, has been quietly coming on. I think they match up well against Arizona State. I think they'll be able to throw the ball on Arizona State. And Jesse, I think your Iowa State Cyclones, as much as this pains me to say, will be going to the college football playoff.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
Whoa.
Leave the kids at home, Jesse. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's
go.
make it happen. He is Thor Nystrom from Matthew Berry's FantasyLife.com and the Fantasy Life platforms. He's a writer. He's a podcaster. He is a thinker. He is a YouTuber. He is a renaissance man of all
revolutionary.
Football. Yes.
He's a revolutionary.
The visionary.
Is there something I should
Vision
know
is
about
scary.
It's a wrestling
What
reference.
suburb
It's a wrestling reference. We'll tell you about it later.
All
right.
later, dude. All right, Thor,
Please
we
do.
love you, dude, and we'll see you for next Thorsday here. Purple Daily, where we just want the Vikings to win a dang Super Bowl before we die.